Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Martin, and I'm very happy to have you with me today for what is now the 17th birthday of the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast as of January 1st, 2025. This podcast is now officially 17 years old and kicking off its 18th year. Yes, I have been doing this a long time. There have been so many talks, so many interviews, so much sharing. It's just awesome. And who knows how much longer I'll be doing this, but definitely it is my plan to continue doing this podcast for the foreseeable future. I really love the opportunity to meet so many interesting people from all around the world doing all different kinds of work in relation to psychedelics and entheogens. And there's just been such a massive change since when I first started this podcast way back in January of 2008. It's just exciting and thrilling to be a part of it and to have such a diverse collection of guests from so many different places in the world with so many different points of views and so many different interests. And I just plan to keep that going. So to mark the birthday and the beginning of the 18th year of the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast, I have what I consider to be something of a milestone interview here, in that when I first moved to Oregon in late 2007, cannabis certainly was not legal at that time. Psilocybin mushrooms were not legal at that time, but things have changed in the time period that I have lived in Southern Oregon, and we now have the very first psilocybin program here in the state of Oregon, which involves trained facilitators and administrators and integration coaches and all of that. And it's been a long time coming. I first had Tom and Cherie Eckert speak down here in Southern Oregon, giving their very first talk on the topic of legalizing psilocybin sessions in the state of Oregon. That was in the summer of 2015, I think, and now we have the program is running, and it hasn't been without its bumps in the road, but it is still being developed and is something of a model for the rest of the United States. So this week I have a multi-person interview with both the director and instructors at Emerald Valley Institute, which is a psilocybin training program in Eugene, just a little bit up the road here in Oregon. So I've got Laurel Eunice, Darren Smith, and Jenna Cluey, who are all involved with Emerald Valley Institute, and they're sharing their different perspectives and different roles within the organization. And we talk all about the program and what is required and just the I's you got to dot and the T's you got to cross and all the rest of that. So we'll get to that in just a minute, but first, just a few announcements. So the big announcement that I have been sharing over the last couple of weeks and will continue to do so is that I am going to be teaching a new course with the Mindscape Psychedelic Institute here in 2025. The class starts at the end of February, and it is a course designed for people who want to work as integration specialists who are informed, knowledgeable, and qualified to work with people with 5-MeO-DMT. Now, as I always say, 5-MeO-DMT is such a unique psychedelic molecule that it requires a special set of knowledge, skills, and applications in order to be a qualified integration coach for 5-MeO-DMT. And I am very serious about this. I do work as an integration coach specializing in 5-MeO-DMT, and it's quite common that I work with clients who say that they went to a psychedelic integration specialist, but that person didn't know about 5-MeO-DMT and therefore had no idea how to help them process and integrate their experience. So that's why I've put together this class with the Mindscape Psychedelic Institute. I also am continuing to teach in the 5-MeO-DMT Facilitator training program offered by Mindscape, but I am one of several professors in that course. But for the 5-MeO-DMT integration class, this is completely designed from top to bottom by yours truly, by me, by the guy who wrote the book on the subject, 5-MeO-DMT integration. It's going to be a 9-week course starting on February 26th. It's going to be held Wednesday afternoons from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. It will span 10 weeks with 1 week off in the middle. And there are assignments and lectures and videos and all kinds of stuff that I've put into this class. It's really a compendium of work I've been doing on 5-MeO-DMT for the past 17 years. So I'm really excited to be offering this class. If you would like more information, there is a link on the mindscapeinstitute.org website and also on my integration website, nondualentheogenicintegration.com. You can use the links that are available there. That will take you to the opt-in page for the integration course. This does not obligate you to anything. You just enter your name and your email, and then you get an email with more information, and it has links to where you can sign up for the class if that is what you want to do. The course itself is being offered for $2,500 for the entire course, or if you are a current or former student of Mindscape Psychedelic Institute, you get a $500 discount, and then it's only $2,000. Yes, there is a little bit of overlap with the Facilitator training course, but honestly, there's not all that much of an overlap. This is much more in-depth and much more detailed, specifically on the topic of 5-MeO-DMT integration. It's very specialized and is designed for those who want to offer professional integration services with 5-MeO-DMT. You're also welcome to email me at martinwball@gmail.com. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, I'd be happy to hear from you. And as we kick off the 18th year of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast, I do want to remind you, the listener, that I make this available to you for free every week. But if you would like to support this podcast, I welcome that, and I encourage you to do so. You can stop by at my Patreon page, patreon.com/martinwball, and there is everything from $1 a month all the way up to $100 a month. And as you go up the tiers of levels of support, you get increasing access, bonuses, and gifts. And at the $100 a month level, you get a 1-hour monthly video call with me to check in with your progress, with your entheogenic experiences, provide you integration, reflection, and feedback, or just to hang out and chat if that's what you want to do. And of course, I'm always available for 30, 60, and 90-minute calls to help you integrate your entheogenic experience from a non-dual and energetic perspective. I specialize in 5-MeO-DMT, but I'm not limited to that in any way, shape, or form. And I'm happy to speak with you about any psychedelic experience that you might be having some questions around your integration or your process or your experience. All right, with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into this first interview for 2025. Again, my guests are Laurel Eunice, Darren Smith, and Jenna Clue, coming from the Emerald Valley Institute Psilocybin Facilitator Training Program. Let's get into it with another history-making interview here on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. Okay, well, I am welcoming on to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast a whole team of people here today from the Emerald Valley Institute, which is based out of Eugene, Oregon, which, for those of you who are familiar with Oregon geography, is about 2.5 hours up Highway 5 from where I am here in Southern Oregon in Ashland. And we're actually being joined by 3 different members of the Emerald Valley team who are currently located in 3 different locations. So we have 4 different windows open here on Skype today. And yes, I'm just running with the numbers. So we've got Laurel Eunice, who is actually in Eugene. We've got Jenna Clue. Did I say your last name correctly?
Close. It's Cluey.
Cluey, okay. And where are you located right now, Jenna?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
In Portland, Oregon, so a little bit further up Highway 5. And we've got Darren Smith, who's somewhere in Washington. Where are you in Washington? Do you say Seattle?
Yes, Seattle, Washington.
All right. Well, we're all in a line. I'm at the bottom. Darren, you're at the top. Laurel and Jenna, you guys are in the middle. All right. So welcome all of you to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this is what I consider to be one of, I would just call it like a touchstone interview here on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. So I'm just going to share a little bit of history with you guys. So just excuse me for talking over you guys for just a minute. But first of all, I started this podcast back in 2008. And there was no talk about legalizing psilocybin in Oregon at that time. Fast forward a number of years later, in 2015, I think it was, I organized the very first public talk for Tom and Cherie Eckert here in Ashland, Oregon at the Jackson Wellsprings at a summertime event. And they came and they gave their very first public presentation about why they wanted to legalize therapeutic sessions with psilocybin here in the state of Oregon, and then also had them back a number of different times. And of course, it took a couple different rounds of working on that law here in Oregon, and then it finally got passed, and then there was the couple-year development part of the program, and then actually launching in terms of courses and institutes that give instruction, and also places that are licensed to provide psilocybin to people. So I have interviewed a couple people who have been through training programs, but now this is my first conversation here on the podcast in 17 years of doing this with an actual institute here in Oregon that trains psilocybin facilitators. So it's a benchmark interview, I think, and just is representative of how far we have come over these 17 years that I've been doing this now. So thank you all for joining me for this and making a little history with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
All right. So now that I've gotten my little spiel out of the way, I'd like to start just by inviting you guys to introduce yourselves. You're welcome to share whatever you want, but I will pepper you with some more questions if I feel like I want some more information from you. But first, let's get to know the team here. And I will mention that we did have plans to have one more individual, Esteban Orzco, but apparently he could not make it. But maybe he's with us here in spirit. But Laurel, maybe let's start with you.
Sure. So my name is Laurel Eunice, and I founded Emerald Valley Institute and get to have the privilege of hiring these amazing instructors and building out the program and continuing to build out additional education opportunities. We're currently working on some continuing education classes as well. And I'm originally from Oregon. I have 3 kiddos that I spend a large majority of my time with. My twins are going to be 18 this year. My youngest is almost 15. So we're doing all sorts of activities. And other than that, I dedicate most of my time to working in this realm and advocacy and continuing to try to make services accessible for everyday people. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Laura. I'll come back with more questions for you. So let's keep on moving up the I-5, heading north into Portland. Jenna, tell us a little bit about yourself and give us an introduction, please.
Thank you. I'm Jenna. I've been a psychonaut for many, many, many years and have had the absolute honor of working in this industry for going a little over 10 now. I started my career as a counselor and started doing some informal integration sessions with my clients and really started to see the amazing progress that was happening with my clients that were using these. And when we were doing some integration work with them, the leaps that they were making with that. So I pivoted and went into Cherie Goddess's program and got my integration coaching certificate there and pivoted my career into integration coaching. I was at a conference and had the privilege of meeting someone to partner with me in opening the Journey Service Center here in Portland. We were the first service center in Portland to open and the first to close. So I have some pretty good history, I guess, not history, knowledge about the whole industry and starting that and being able to witness the amazing healing walking out of that place every day that we were open. It was amazing. And then I moved on to Fractal Service Center and started their equity program there. Equity and making this whole thing accessible to the folks that really need it is a really big thing for me as well. So I'm very happy that when Laurel extended the invitation to be an instructor at her school with that same kind of value. So I'm super pumped about that. And then my personal life, I also have 3 kiddos. Mine are all boys. I have a 17, 14, and 11-year-old boys, and they keep me very, very busy. And the holiday season being upon us, it is going into full mode of getting all the busy stuff wrapped up and getting ready for vacation. So busyness, relaxation at the same time. So looking forward to that. And thank you very much for having us here.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jenna. Okay. And now going all the way up to the top, Darren, I invite you to introduce yourself.
All right. Hey, I'm Darren Smith, and I live in Seattle. I work as a PA. I'm a physician assistant. I work in psychiatry. I do child adolescent psychiatry. I'm also a neurofeedback clinician. I use neurofeedback with patients who are suffering from anywhere from MDD, major depressive disorder, all the way to ADHD. And like Jenna, I've gotten some very good results with neurofeedback, just using that modality as a way to unlock, and have people to kind of come into themselves and develop more self-awareness and more executive control. And I found that patients do extremely well with that combination. I think it would be safe to say that it would probably be a good enhancer of psilocybin services if we use another modality to help cement all that change that's happening in the brain when people are under the influence of a psychedelic substance. So I think the two together would be amazing. So one, I came to this space via the research route. So I was talking to my new colleague Laurel earlier about my search for finding some sort of way to help people to ameliorate the suffering that they endure every day just by being different in our society and not being a part of the norm or typical, if you will. And that includes neurodivergent folks as well. So just trying to find ways and then of course reading and stumbling upon this wonderful work that's been going on about 4 or 5 years ago, and just like, oh my God, I need to investigate this. And I soon discovered that I'm a handful of Black people in it, but that's nothing new. I'm always finding myself in places where I'm the only one. But so far, white people have been real nice to me. But saying that it was race and oppression and indifference that brought me to this space. And so since then, I've been on a couple of major boards, the American Psychedelic Prescribers Association. We tried to sort of integrate the profession and sort of create standards around what this would look like at a national level. So we had we had a method of maintaining one's credentials, also a way of maintaining CEUs, continuing education, which I agree with Laurel is a very important part of this whole endeavor, is to make sure people are getting trained and staying on top of the latest research and science that's going on with this industry. So that's kind of how I entered it. And since then, I've met just some amazing people, Martin, amazing people. And I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to associate with these folks and to be able to build community with them. And also it strengthens my work, makes my work more important and more, I love what Jenna was saying earlier about how she said the incredible leaps that she noticed with her patients, with her clients. And so, yeah, that's the same thing I have experienced. And I want to provide that same opportunity for people who don't have access to it, such as usually people of color, homelessness or houselessness folks, veterans. I'm also a veteran, Army veteran, PA, go PAs, push it up. I was an Army aviation PA, and I enjoyed that. But anyway, another story. So yes, I am so excited about this industry, and I'm very excited about being a member of this organization, because I'm talking to the founder. It sounds like our mission is my mission and the mission of Emerald Valley, and listening to Jenna talk about her what's important to her. I think the stars aligned, the universe is aligned.
All right. Well, thank you all for giving us a little introduction about yourselves and what brings you into this work. And it sounds like we've got a lot more to talk about here with all of you. And I really appreciate that you're all kind of coming from different backgrounds and involved in different levels of this work, and also not only associated with Emerald Valley in Eugene, but obviously, Darren, you're up there in Washington. You're doing your own thing up there. Jenna, very interested in hearing a little bit more about the Journey Service Center and what happened there, and then the Fractal Service Center. Great name, by the way. Love the fractals. Can't go wrong with a good fractal. So, gosh, where should we start? Let's start with the germination of Emerald Valley Institute, and maybe for probably most of my audience is pretty well informed about this, but maybe let's just spell out what is the Psilocybin Services Initiative here in Oregon. What's the difference between a training institute and a service center, and the different roles that people are playing there? Because we've already heard about a couple different aspects of how all this works, but maybe let's just kind of spell it out for the audience again about what is the legal and professional situation here in Oregon around psilocybin services, and what distinguishes Emerald Valley within that overview of how it all works. So maybe that's for Laurel.
Okay. And Jenna might be a good person to speak on this as well. She's super informed and educated, especially on the service center bit of it as well. But so legally in Oregon, people are able to now access psilocybin services. They have to do it at a licensed service center in Oregon. And the people that provide those services are called psilocybin facilitators. So essentially, psilocybin facilitators, in order to become licensed, have to go through an OHA or HEC approved training program. And so in order to get through the OHA and HEC process, there's some paperwork involved. We have to adhere to different rules and regulations to make sure that our students are protected. There's a thing in place called the Tuition Protection Fund to ensure that students are able to get refunds from training programs if they're not providing the services adequately, or other things happen during the training program, which is what HEC provides as well. But essentially, we differentiate ourselves from other training programs because we do a flat rate, low cost tuition. So on average, the other training programs in Oregon tend to be around $6,000 and up, plus the cost of practicum, which can also be an additional couple $1,000s. So we do a flat rate program of $3,995. That includes practicum. It includes all your curriculum, all your course materials, all your learning materials. So it's about half the cost of the other training programs out there. And the reason that we do that is because we want to create equity, inclusivity, and diversity in the ability for people to become licensed facilitators. We don't want people that just have privileged economic statuses to be able to become licensed. And also, we want those facilitators to then go on and be able to provide more accessible services. So if we can provide a lower cost tuition rate, then they can turn around and trickle that down to clients and provide more affordable services. So that's kind of the founding tenets and goal of the Institute.
Great. And Jenna, is there anything you'd like to add about the facilitation side and how that's run in terms of service centers?
Sure. So there is a misconception that the service centers are kind of like a dispensary. That's something that we've run across many, many times. So the way the program works is you have to have preparation done with your facilitator, and then on the day of the trip, you come to a service center and you have to buy the mushrooms and consume the mushrooms at the service center with your facilitator present. And yeah, that's how that works. There's a lot of rules around that about what can and can't be done. It's a non-directive model, so your facilitator is not to be like guiding you per se. And there's, minimum stay time. So it depends on how much psilocybin you consume. You have to stay a certain amount of time at the service center.
I think about harm reduction. And some of these programs really aren't. They're all about trying to make money and not about trying to really do service to this new profession, this new emerging profession, i.e. facilitation. workers. So I have a problem with that, and I think the Alma Institute found out about that early on. So which makes Laurel's business, the Emerald Valley, even more compelling, given the price that she's charging for this. I mean, that's a steal when you can consider what other people are charging in the area. So I'm always happy to be a part of anybody like that that's trying to make it easier for people to access this who otherwise wouldn't have a chance. So bravo.
I mean, statistically, if you look at the average cost of savings that Americans have, like most people don't even have $8,000 to their name. So then you turn around and ask someone to spend $8,000, $11,000 on a training program, like you're gonna make that accessible to what, 5% of the population at that rate? That's just, you can't go and get federal funding, you can't get grants, you can't get loans typically. So it's just, it makes it a very privileged program at that point, and that's not right, and that's not fair, and it's also not providing the diversity that we need. Like someone that's from a different culture or different background isn't going to necessarily identify with me, who's from, the West Coast, that grew up in a small town. And so you need to be able to provide that diversity and have other people into the mix and have voices in here as well. Just like Darren was saying, African-American representation, that's important. And we're not seeing that when that needs to change.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I'm enjoying listening to you guys talk about your insights on your end of the equation here. Oh, she's going to bark again. So let's talk a little bit about curriculum and development of curriculum. And one of the things that I'd like to distinguish here is that there are lots of places where people can go, especially online, and get instructions around facilitation and integration. For example, I teach with the Mindscape Psychedelic Institute. We tend to focus on 5-MeO-DMT. There are no legal programs around 5-MeO-DMT. But looking at your curriculum, we have a lot of the same things with like ethics, trauma-informed, facilitation, informed consent, all of this kind of stuff. But for example, I'm going to be teaching a class next year on integrating 5-MeO-DMT experiences, but I can just make it up however I want because it's not like there is a legal program somewhere that has any kind of conditions or guidelines that I need to follow. And I think this is also where institutes like Emerald Valley is kind of different from, there have been earlier programs that I know that have been out there around psilocybin facilitation, but a lot of those programs got started before there actually was a legal program such as the one here in Oregon, so they might not have addressed what are the specifics of what is required within the state of Oregon. So if we could kind of keep that in mind of what does it mean to create a curriculum, create courses around this that actually is attending to the law and then really producing skilled, knowledgeable facilitators that are ready to pick up this task of ushering people through these very powerful experiences. So we can start with any one of you who'd like to jump on that topic.
Come on, Jenny. You're chomping at the bit.
I can start if you guys would like. So sure. All of the licensed schools in Oregon that have the HEC and OHA licensure we have mandated curriculum. And so all of the topics and subtopics are topics that all schools have to teach. We have the same amount of mandatory curriculum hours as well. So then basically the differentiator is that you can determine how you teach those topics, what materials you use to teach those topics, and you can also expand upon those topics and add additional topics as long as you stay within the legalities, right? So that's essentially where the structure of the curriculum comes from and the overall topics. We do try to go deeper on certain topics, and we have we use certain resources that I don't believe other schools are using right now in their training programs. We use OpenStax education textbooks. So they're a college level textbook company, and they have subjects like anthropology, sociology, anatomy and physiology. There's like, honestly, they have about 50 to 60 textbooks. And so we have access to those resources to teach from for our students as well. So we like to build a foundation in certain topics to educate the student and then build upon those with the psilocybin aspect involved as well, and then expand upon that. So that's kind of where it all comes from. And,
and so just to jump in on that a little bit, so this is all like these requirements. This is what was developed by kind of, I don't know what the name of it was, maybe the exploratory committee, whatever it was, whenever the law was passed. I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was at least a year, maybe it was 2 years of development around what are the guidelines going to be. And that was, and I was not a part of that. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that was done by people who are experienced and familiar with psilocybin and also the history and the science and the medical issues. And so those are the ones who put together, these are the curriculum requirements.
Yeah, and let me add to that. So what they do is that I'm very familiar with the Oregon, with the measure 109, and I've been following this for a minute, and I've been very privileged to be able to meet some people inside the OHA and talk about this and what's happening. And in fact, I would even credit myself as being the one who actually introduced the concept of CEUs to Angela. What's Angela's last name?
Albee.
And was it again?
Albee.
Yeah. Angela, she works for the OHA, excuse me. And so I'm glad to see they did that finally. And then Laurel said, I'm gonna jump on it. So Laurel sees the opportunity to make sure that, and I think that's a great thing. So the next thing I think it needs to happen is that we need to organize all of our facilitators. So that there's a standard of practice, if you will, standard of facilitation, a code of facilitation, or something like that everybody can agree upon. What I think the requirements do is they serve as placeholders, and people can dissect each one of those things and expand upon them. So there's just not a placeholder, and actually get into some real meat and potatoes when it comes to the genesis of these compounds, their use. With indigenous populations, everything from that to the war on drugs, which prohibited much of this up until the Renaissance in the 90s. And then, of course, we're steamrolling now. We've been set back a little bit with MDMA. Recent FDA decision, I think it was June 4th, 2024, that the FDA said, no, we don't want MDMA. And there was a whole bunch of stuff behind that. But I think there's other things coming. By the way, Martin, interestingly enough, I'm a consultant with USANA, and USANA is producing a 5-MeO injection. Did you know that?
Yes, I am familiar. I had my opportunity 2 weeks ago to experience 5-MeO injectable for the first time.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice. I'd love to hear your experiences too sometime about that. But I think that might be a wonderful, a tool in our toolkit to use particularly against addiction, people suffering from addiction. So the curriculum is been curated by this panel, a committee of experts that have been convened by the governor's office there in Oregon. The same thing is happening with us in Washington. We passed a provision there, or at least we made recommendations to Governor Inslee, who just left. Now we have a new governor in, and we're hoping that governor will go ahead and implement all of the committee work that I was involved in, and making sure that Washington has the same kinds of provisions in place that Oregon has. So, I mean, Oregon and Washington are like brother and sister cities. What one does, the other does. So if Oregon does it first and Washington will second, Washington will do it and you guys will do it. So that's kind of neat to have that symbiosis between our two cities and our two states. So so not only is Washington following the Oregon provision, everybody is following the Oregon provision, from Colorado to Massachusetts. The Massachusetts bill didn't pass this past election cycle, but they'll be back to the drawing board again. There's other places online. Oregon, but Arizona's coming online. California is working through their provisions right now. So if the feds fail to act, and there's some questions as to whether or not JFK, if he's the director of HSS, he has some very good feelings about psychedelic substances, and so we'd like to see those come into fruition. But it's not going to be his decision. It's going to be a panel of scientific experts that make that decision ultimately. But I think we're on the right course. I think we're 2 or 3 years out before we have anything federal in the pipeline in terms of moving toward that. I think MDMA, the recommendation was another trial. So we're looking at, 2 more years, 3 more years. Back to the drawing board, raising the millions of dollars that need to be raised in order to bring a drug to market, which is an astronomical number to do. So I think it'll be MDMA will be in the last part of this medication push to legalization, federal legalization. I think the psilocybin pill will be first on the market, and I think they're about a year out or 2 years out still. So there's some things coming. I'm excited about it. But the cool thing about it, I'll say one last thing, I'll be quiet, is that Oregon has really has really opened up Pandora's box in a good way. Because now states can say, oh, we can do this. We can have state sanctioned, psilocybin service centers where people can actually go and get safe and effective treatment or care for their ailment. Wow. That's pretty neat. So Oregon will be forever etched in the history of this movement moving forward as being the first state to legal. I mean, you guys ought to be proud of yourselves. I know you got to have a lot of humdrum people out in the rural communities, and it's often more difficult to get people in the rural communities to understand this because they're the last people to get any information.
Yeah.
So all right, I'm done now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Darren. I think that it's a really good point to make that Oregon really is a pioneer here. And one of the things that I think is really beautiful about it is that it really is an example of what happens or what is possible within participatory democracy, in the sense that it really did start with Tom and Cherie Eckert and going out and we're going to start talking about how do we make this legal within this state. And it's not like they were the first people to ever have that idea, but they're the ones who said, okay, we're going to do it. So then I organized a talk for them. I'm not trying to take any responsibility. I'm just saying it was an honor to actually organize their very first public talk and kind of get that ball rolling. And then the education was a big part of it. It's like, Darren, you were saying that a lot of people who are not familiar with psilocybin or not familiar with psychedelics, a lot of misunderstandings, like when the bill was actually up for voting on here in Oregon, one of the quote unquote counter arguments was, oh, they're going to take all our water to grow all these mushrooms. It's like, what? No, you just don't know what you're talking about. And just from years of demonization of the war on drugs, that, oh, this is just bad. And it's like, look, this is non-toxic, it's non-addictive, it has lots of medical applications, has lots of therapeutic uses, has lots of spiritual uses. I mean, really, we need to educate ourselves about this. So how we are doing it here in Oregon is potentially going to serve as a model for how participatory democracy can spread throughout the United States around the legal use of psychedelics for, I know we can't really call it therapy because that's part of the conditions of the program, but for personal growth. We can just put it that way, a little bit more neutral. So there are a lot of eyes on Oregon, and what happens here is going to be influential in how these programs develop elsewhere around the country. So, that's a lot of pressure in a sense. And so I think it's very important that Oregon do it right and also acknowledge when things have been done wrong. There was an early issue down here in Ashland where a group that was doing the facilitator training, that they went bankrupt and people lost their money and then the students didn't know where to go. And yeah, we need to own that and say, okay, mistakes were made. So how do we do this in a way that really is responsible to the students and the teachers, and then the end goal of having these highly skilled facilitators who can provide this very potent medicine to people? And maybe, I don't even know if we can use the word medicine. That's
not supposed to.
Yeah, not supposed to. I know. It's hard when, the culture is like, I gave a talk one time and some reporter from some place snuck in and said that he was my friend, and it was on a Zoom call and he had his screen turned off and then he turned it on when he was able to ask a question, and he was not my friend. I didn't know this guy. And it's like, well, I noticed that you're not you have a PhD, but you're not a medical doctor and you're calling it medicine. And I was like, dude, that's just the culture. We all refer to psychedelics as medicine. It's a cultural thing. No, we are not speaking as doctors. But we refer to it as medicine. Like when you go to, if I were to go out to Williams and go to the Native American church, we'd say, we're going to eat some medicine, and we're talking about peyote. If we go to the Santo Daime church, we're going to drink some medicine, and that's ayahuasca. But it's just the way we talk about it. But anyway, I'm rambling and ranting a little bit. But I'm just excited to talk to you guys. Talk about all of this.
I think a really good point there about like the language too, because I think that having these new terminologies has kind of created a barrier for people to understand what it is that's going on in Oregon, as well as like training programs. Nobody knows what a facilitator is, but people know what a psychedelic trip sitter is, or a psychedelic therapist, or, you know, so these new words and verbiage that is being used and legally has to be used, or legally isn't allowed to be used, is also creating like where we have to educate more people on these are the new terms and this is what they mean. Like, so we've seen that what's the statistic? Like 35% of Oregonians even know that you can legally now use psilocybin in the service center. I mean, that's not the greatest statistic. It's been all over the news. And I mean, I know psychonauts that have been in the industry for a long time and they had no idea, which shocked me. But it's, again, the terminology. Nobody knows what a facilitator is, or a service center, or
administration session, like the
administration session. People don't use the word psilocybin either in our culture, right? Like,
I'm wondering if those people are are mostly from the rural sectors of Oregon.
Like Portland area, Eugene. It's just different words and verbiage that nobody has ever used until this point. These are like new terminologies and phrasing that we're having to adjust to and get used to. Just like Martin was just saying, like, we still call it medicine. I call it medicine in my conversational talk to people, as I always have. But now when I'm having talks and discussing things with students or in different arenas, I can't say the word medicine. I have to use the word whatever I come up with that's an analogy to medicine. And then you're stuck fumbling for words too, because it's not natural. You have to really get used to it.
Yeah, or if you're opening up an entheogenic church, then you need to refer to it as a sacrament. You definitely can't call it a medicine. And you might have a healing session, but you can't call it therapy because you're not a therapist. And, I think that this stuff is important, but it is a little bit tricky for those of us who are just more culturally attuned to, well, this is what we've been calling it for a long time. And another word that opens up a lot of questions for people these days is the aspect of integration and having an integration session. And that, like, back when I was doing my most profound work with 5-MeO-DMT back in 2008 and 2009, sometimes today people ask me, like, well, what did you do to integrate your experiences? It's like, that wasn't even a word back then. Like, we didn't even talk about it that way. So this is all part of the therapeutic approach. But here again, we can't call it therapy because we're not therapists. So maybe let's just talk a little bit more like so when you have a session with psilocybin, what can we call it within this context? Is it a session?
It's a psilocybin facilitation session. That's what I would call it.
Okay.
Psilocybin facilitation.
In the rules, it's called administration session, the actual day of. Yeah. And they call it the administration session. Yeah.
But then is the facilitator a facilitator or an administrator?
Right. No, the service center is technically the administrator. That's how they talk about it as far as liability wise. Because there was a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions about liability. Like, so if, the facilitator and the client decide on the dose, but I'm the one dispensing the dose, where is my liability there? And OHA couldn't really answer it. I don't know if there's really an answer to that yet. But they basically said it lies in both, because the no one's really administering anything. So that's why it doesn't make sense to call it an administration session to me. But here we are. I was, as the service center, I was to hand it to the client. So I guess I administer, but then they take it, which is technically administration. But the client has to be the one taking it. Once it leaves the hands of the service center person, then
the provider, maybe the provider, I'm providing you with it.
Yeah. The service center person there that day, operator, I guess, for the day. Once it leaves their hands, it must go to the client's hand. The facilitator actually never is supposed to touch the mushroom, the psilocybin. Which is interesting, like, because a lot of times the clients are like, what do I do with this thing here? And so that was kind of the early on days of like, how do we even go about the process of dosing folks as we run them through the center? It's a lot of little nuances that has been interesting to do this, especially when there's multiple people coming at the center, protecting privacy. The fact that the facilitator themselves can't touch it, so they have to touch it. And then when I first started, I used whole mushrooms. So then the grinding of the mushrooms. So for example, this was part of my inspection going through. I had a coffee grinder and a couple blenders set up on I had a big long like counter with teas and stuff in the refrigerator, and I was going to have stuff for like smoothies in the refrigerator, so they could make a tea, they could make a smoothie, they could make what they wanted with it. Well, I couldn't do the smoothie thing, and I had to get rid of the blender because that's considered food prep, and I had to have my food, like FDA license for food, making food for a restaurant. Yeah. So I had to have that if I wanted to have smoothies. So we got rid of the smoothies. And then even the coffee grinder, they had some issue with. They're like, so that's electric. How does it completely get cleaned in between clients to make sure there's no residue? You have to show me how that's going to be a thing. So I ended up just getting a bunch of handheld pot grinders, and we just had everyone grind their own in the rooms so they could have their own privacy doing the thing. But it was interesting just trying to figure out all those little steps of how to follow the rules and make it not weird.
Yeah. Well, it definitely sounds a little bit Baroque in terms of who can touch what and what, but there is a reason for all of that. And I guess for those of us who want to work in this area and the legal realm, that these are hoops that need to be jumped through, and that it's not just arbitrary. And it might sound a little frustrating, like, why can't I just use my coffee grinder? Why can't I just make a smoothie? But, well, you can do that at home, but you're not legally protected if you do that at home. So these are the rules, and we need to work with them, right? So this is why, obviously, because of so many different ins and outs like this, I think this is why programs like Emerald Valley Institute are absolutely necessary, that we need to have professional organizations that are professionalizing the profession so that people know what to do. And it sounds like we could also need like a little handbook, like a glossary list of terms and practices and things like that. Darren, I saw that you had a little hand up there. You want to jump in?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that you're right. Some of the minutia of the law, the particulars of the law, I think those things will change as time goes on. And as Oregon figures this out, because it's still a practice, this is a new institution, a brand new, never been in existence before. And you talked about so aptly, Martin, with the whole notion of a participatory democracy. This is an experiment. So it's going to take time to work through some of the silly, constraints of the law right now, rules that have been set. I think one of the crazier ones is, Jenna, you can probably relate to this, is if you are a practitioner and have a license in another profession, you can't work under the auspices of your license. You can't commingle those two licenses together. That makes absolutely no sense to me. The reason being is that I'm a trained healthcare professional. That's going to come through whether I like it or not. I can't partition that part of my experience of understanding a person's suffering. That's a lens in which I've been trained to see the world through. So if somebody telling me you can't use that, it's just ridiculous. It doesn't comport with human behavior, right? So I do like what Colorado has done and sort of expanded that, but still Oregon, we need to do better, and having people expand that.
Yeah, I think they're working on that. I think the Healing Advocacy Fund has got something in motion where they're working on some rule changes. And however, as a former counselor, I mean, that is why I dropped my license. One of the many reasons of not wanting to work within an insurance-run industry. But one of them was the fact that I was not allowed to recommend or suggest psychedelic medicines for my clients. And it also makes sense though for me is as a therapist, dual relationships is one of the big ethical no-nos. So having a dual relationship, unless we're able to call it psychedelic therapy, and then that's a type of therapy we're doing, but if we're not able to call it that, then it is technically a dual relationship. So it's not just the psilocybin licensure side of things, but it's also the clinical licensure side of things that would be considered a dual relationship if you're working in two different things. So right now, how it stands, if we could call it psychedelic therapy and make it a form of therapy that therapists could do and use their license for, then having that relationship works, because then you're doing that. But right now it's saying, no, I can't use my therapeutic practice, which I totally agree with. It's ridiculous. Like, how do you remove that knowledge and say, oh, I don't know how to counsel people. I've been doing it for 20 years, but I don't do that now. I'm only doing this. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I am happy that they're making some movement in Oregon right now to try to fix that a little bit. And they are. OHA has been great about hearing. I don't know if you're aware of the listening sessions that they have. For the past 2 years, they've been doing multiple listening sessions with recommendations. They've had like two of the things that I wrote in on, they've changed, which I was very happy about. So the non-directive thing was one of them. It was very, very strict, non-directive. I'm like, but if someone has a skill, like, for example, I'm very well trained in DBT skills. That was my specialty, is borderline personality disorder. So everything that falls under treatment of that, that's what I'm really good at. So like mindfulness training, for example, if I had a person that said, hey, I want to do a mindfulness practice while I'm using the mushrooms, and they chose me as a facilitator because that's a skill that I also have, I should be able to do that if that's what's being asked for. And they did make that change. So technically, if a client asks for some direction, like, hey, I want to practice yoga while I'm doing this, so they pick someone who has a yoga instructor background, they can do that now. They've changed that. So that was one of the really good changes that they have made. Another one that didn't make sense to me was that there was no 3-hour minimum stay time. So they've added that with the dosing. It went up to 10 milligrams was 2 hours at the service center. And then it jumped from 10 to 25 milligrams. That whole amount had to stay at the service center for 4 hours. I'm like, well, where's the 3 hours? What if you only want like 12 milligrams? And you're like, I've been done in 3 hours before, so why would I need to sit there and like stare at each other in these small rooms with my facilitator for an extra hour because the state said so. So they heard us and said, oh, yeah, that makes sense. There's this middle ground between 10 and 15 that it would make sense that maybe a 3-hour stay. So they've changed that too. So there are a lot of things that they're very open to changing. And so that's one of the things that we're learning, that just as this great experiment unfolds, is what kind of things can we kind of change and tweak here. And they're doing it. So I'm happy about that.
Yes. I would second that. I mean, I know that there's some robust changes underway there, and I know that the organization that represents facilitators and this whole movement has really made some concerted efforts to listen to the people. I think it goes back again what Martin was saying, participatory democracy. So this is an action. So I think Oregon will continue to refine this, so it's much easier to facilitate the work that needs to be done with folks who really need this care. So,
but it needs to be done safely. So I really appreciate how nitpicky they were so that we can do this without anything major happening. I mean, I know that I don't know the numbers for sure. I know that some people say the healing advocacy numbers are inflated a little bit. There's somewhere between 3,000 to 7,000 people being served that have been served. I'm not really sure what exactly that number is, but I do know that the numbers that are reported for adverse reactions are like 5. That is amazing, whether it's 3,000 or 7,000. Either one of those two numbers, only 5 people having any kind of issue from this is amazing. And I'm so excited and I hope that the news gets out more about that. A lot of the news people run the negative stuff. Like, I was really pissed about the Journey's news media coverage about it being so negative about the cost. Yes, the cost is an issue, and we are getting there. We're making waves to make that different, including that's part of why I'm so happy to be part of Emerald Valley. It's because folks like Laurel are here to make this more affordable, and we'll get there. But that's not helping the movement when that's all people want to talk about in the news is, the numbers aren't as good and the Journey failed because they didn't make enough money. That wasn't true, but well, it wasn't. But And that's not the bigger news story here is that thousands of people have moved through this program now with 5 issues of the authorities being called or any kind of medical complications. I think there was 1 person that had a mental health issue, like 2 with some physical stuff, and then the other 2 were that they left the service center before they were supposed to. And now that is kind of a thing. Is that we now have the service centers have to call the authorities if they leave before they're done. And some people are like, no, like if people don't launch on 50 milligrams, they have to stay there for 5 hours or 6 hours. 6 hours of like, I'm done here. I don't want to do this anymore. This was disappointing. I don't want to sit here in this room and talk through how disappointing it was that I didn't launch. So let me leave. The law states that we have to call the authorities still if they're not following their transportation plan and they leave. So
that's probably an area that needs to be addressed at some point.
It's been worked on. That's actually a change that I thought was a negative. And they have to call the authorities. Now we were trying to make it so there was kind of like a against medical advice situation where they could sign paperwork that they were leaving on their own free will. And they said, no, we couldn't just do that. We got to call.
It would be nice to have a medical, a Western something trained person in there to say, yeah, you good. You can go. And then make it easy just to, for folks not to sit there 5 hours.
Right. But that's going to cost something and there's no money.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear that the whole program is at least amenable to these ongoing tweaks and improvements and kind of addressing what is the reality of how this is working, what do we need to change, and getting that feedback and doing that back and forth of how do we make the best program possible. And going back to the money thing, that it's a big part of it, that we all live in a monetary economy, so we can't just do this for free, that people are making a living and then people have to pay for the services. And so it's just a part of that. But I think it's a great question of how can it be made more equitable, reach a more diverse clientele, make it more accessible to people who maybe wouldn't be able to get into a program because it's too cost prohibitive, and just keep tweaking it, keep working it. And then hopefully as things, especially as they spread around the country and maybe we have some change at the federal level, that will help with, then maybe insurance can actually become involved. And I know that that's a big issue now. And even with these dual roles, like you can't be a therapist and a facilitator, and then there's all the insurance questions and who's paying for what. So it's a complicated system, unfortunately, but it's got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, with respect to insurance, man. Yeah, the insurance thing is off the table until there's some federal action. States can cover anything in the state through state Medicaid office. So it could be that states or people in the state start petitioning for coverage for these services and bypass the federal. The federal right, which is often very slow. I think this is done. I think the idea of safety, you were talking about that, Jenna. And one thing that came to mind is I think a year ago or so, I got a report from OHA, some of the complaints that were being raised, that were being filed, or people complaining about this, that, and the third clients. It was really interesting to see some of that stuff play out. And one of the things that caught my attention were a couple of instances where they had facilitators who were working with communities of color folks, and there were some 2 ships passing in the night, and then people end up getting out and running out, and those kinds of things. Making sure that people are prepared to work with. You don't know what's going to show up, when that journey hits. You just don't know, and so it'd be nice. It's particularly with people of color to have people who look like the people that they're serving. So they can sort of mitigate some of that. Not that, and I'm going to speak in terms of black and white. It's not that white folks can't do this with people of color. That's not it. What's it is that because there's a lack of misunderstanding about different populations and groups that we don't talk about until you get to college, if you even get it then. And of course, as you all know, that across the country, there's been a concerted effort to silence the voices of anything outside of what is perceived as being American history, right?
Right.
Which encompasses everything, everything, Black history, Native American, everything. So this cherry picking of history and this attack on truth, as it's been done and I think we'll see more of that coming up in this, unfortunately, the next 4 years. I think really is damaging for folks who want to do this. And so I'm saying that my white brothers and sisters out there who are doing this work and who want to work with everybody, there's a difference between equality and equity. They're not the same thing. And so what we should be striving for is equity with facilitation work. And so one of the things, again, I have to applaud Sister Laurel for is her commitment to that. Her and I spoke about that earlier. I'm just impressed because there's been so many of these programs that have come and gone in Oregon, these schools, these training facilities. And people are in it for the wrong reasons. Education is the least place where you're going to get paid. Okay. I mean, I teach at the university. I'm not raking it in, as a professor at a university, but, so it's really a labor of love at the end of the day, and so the schools and training of facilitation, and we ought to take pride in that because this is a very new, what happens in this state is going to affect every other state in the nation. So I can't say enough how important it is that we get this right. Oregon gets this right, as a good, excellent case in point. And I'm really quite pleased, Jenna, with the progress that is being made to make that happen. So kudos to OHA.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Darren, I would just love to echo the points around representation and equity. That when people are working with psychedelic substances, I was about to say medicines, but when people are working with psychedelic substances, they're going into very, very vulnerable states, potentially very revealing, very transformative states, and that touches on people's personal history, identity, any traumas that they've encountered, and then having the right facilitator can be very, very important for people to feel that they're in a state of trust, that they're being held appropriately, that they're not being too vulnerable to the wrong person. And so that's where it does make a difference. What ethnicity or what gender or, what presentation your facilitator has. And that, yes, it's lovely to have the ideal of we live in a colorblind society and none of it matters. But the thing is that it does matter, and that history matters, and that socioeconomic status and culture and history, all that shit matters. And so it matters that we have proper representation in order to meet a diverse clientele and to meet a diverse public. That's just reality. And so I just wanted to second that and applaud that.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. Yeah.
So what I'd love us to do is let's talk a little bit more actually about the curriculum and just how it works in the classes and how you guys function as instructors. And let's talk a little bit more about that. So I've got that up here on the website. And listeners, it's emeraldvalleyinstitute.com, and I'm at the curriculum page. And it has a curriculum breakdown. But let's talk a little bit more about these different aspects of what are often called modules in the courses of these different areas of study and why they're important for a well-rounded facilitator training program. Laurel?
Well, I think that all aspects of the curriculum are equally important, to be honest with you. I think it's important so if we just look at kind of, I don't know how in depth you want to get on the curriculum or modules, but for instance, the first one is the historical, traditional, and contemporary practices and the applications, and that we learn about the traditional and contemporary practices and applications. We learn about the history behind it from the indigenous peoples. We learn about the different methodologies and practices that were used and the reasoning behind them. We learn to honor that as well, and to not do cultural appropriation, which is important. We also learn about the different laws and how they were created and why they were created and the implications that had on different ethnicities, as well as this being able to be used moving forward from the 60s and 70s forward, and the Controlled Substance Act and related laws and the implications that had on certain targeting of races, to be quite honest with you. and how that looks and looked, and how that also ultimately stopped us from being able to use these modalities and stop the research and just basically like put everything in a black hole up until not too long ago. And just essentially the impact and effects of it. And Jenna might actually be really good to talk on this one, because this is one of the modules that she is instructing on.
Yeah. You just covered a lot of it.
Ramble, so.
Anything you want to add to that, Jenna? You're welcome to do so.
I think just, the effects of how, our government actually used it, working with the government now to reinstitute a practice around this, and then the research that has been coming out now since then, really since the, in the 90s, when the David Nutt and others out in London and other places started really getting back into researching this stuff, and how that really kind of jumped. And that's some of the stuff that like Tom and Cherie Eckert really helped them along the way in their passing of this law, with some of that more recent stuff that came out. I don't know what else to expand upon really without teaching.
And then, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, please. Please.
I was gonna pass it to you anyways, because you're up next on that. Darren teaches the cultural equity in relation to psilocybin services module, and he's a wealth of information and incredibly well versed. And I'll just give him the floor on this topic.
Yeah, go for it, Darren.
Yeah. So one of the cool things, one of the unique things that Oregon has done is they require these training. I think is it either the training institutions or is it the participants themselves to have a cultural plan or something like that?
Plan. Yeah.
Okay, so that's really unique. So I think that's really interesting and unique. So and also the emphasis on cultural equity and in this process. I think I mentioned some of that earlier and how important it is, to have that. And so I think one of the things we do at Emerald Valley is to instill that in our students, in our future facilitators, that they understand when they for instance, when I was trained as a PA, for instance, one of the big things they told us is that we're teaching you how not to kill someone, right? You're learning enough so you don't kill anyone. So, and that's always stuck in my mind, and the decisions you make and the medicines you prescribe can sometimes have a deep impact on people. So I feel the same way. So I want to make sure we arm our students with the knowledge that they need to be able to make good choices around, working with people of color and communities of color, whether that be referring off or whether that be, consulting with a colleague in the industry, in the field, that can help them with that. Because as you said earlier, Martin, taking these medicines or taking these compounds can open up, a world of ego disillusion. So it's nice to have people who can kind of understand that and kind of help people get through it. So we are basically following what the Oregon with who is it again, Jana? It's HEC and Higher Education Commission, according to the commission, right? HEC. So Jenna, this program is credentialed and by these two organizations, OHA and HEC. And so what that means is that we have to have teachers like Jenna, myself, and my other colleague who couldn't be here, who have the experience and skills to be able to teach these. I mean, Jenna can teach this in her sleep, I would imagine. Me too. I often sleep, with these things on my mind to begin with. And so we'll bring. I mean, my area of expertise would be, and people always enlist me to do things like teach race and so on, because that's what I do anyway. So I'm not offended by it. You ever get offended, Darren? Because no, that's what I teach. That's what I know. That's my thing. I'm totally not offended by it. So I do those things, and I try to help people understand these important aspects, as well as I do neuroscience. I do the I'm very well versed in the psilocybin pharmacology, the clinical research that's currently that's happening across the country with a couple of different biotech companies who are trying to bring these medicines to existence. So I'll do my very best to educate these folks and get them prepared to be able to work with an array of people with an array of different problems that they may confront. So, yeah.
All right, great. And then moving on, so I'm just moving down the list. We've got safety, ethics, and responsibilities, we have psychedelic ethics in the Oregon's Facilitator Code of Ethics. And so let's talk a little bit about this part of the program and what this covers.
So I teach this one.
Yeah, this is Jenna's little house. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, this one, I spoke on safety earlier. This is really, really important to me because the last thing this movement needs is to have some unethical, unsafe practices spreading in practice. And so one of the things I love, Darren, that you said that one of the things ethically responsible is to be able to refer. And how do you talk to a client about, I'm not the best fit for you, and being able to refer them to a colleague that would be a better fit. So that's just one. Sometimes you are just as well-meaning as you can be. You are just not safe and ethically fit to be a facilitator for that person. So I'm glad that you touch on that in yours. I'll touch on that in mine, in my section too. And then a lot of other things, but I guess one of the biggest things as a counselor, and one of my favorite things in grad school, was the big weekend practicum thing that we did on Know Thyself. That was the name of the class that we had to do. And I think that was probably the best class out of every other class in grad school or undergrad, was that one in particular, because if you don't know who you are and what you bring to the table, to that room, you don't know what you could possibly be doing to damage that client sitting across from you. And I think that's one of my biggest messages for this, is to know yourself and really to do your own work so that you're not projecting and transferring any of that onto your own, or onto your client, your own shit onto your client. So that's a huge, huge part of it. But just also knowing things about like appropriate touch. Oregon has very, very specific rules about touch. It's hands, shoulders, feet, and head, like forehead. That's it. And asking for consent. So there will be a long talk about consent and what that looks like. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than it's a really important piece. I'm glad that that's a separate section that has a whole chunk. It's not just like a day. We're going to talk about this for 3 days or the whole week about safety and ethics and different things about safety. Safety isn't just physically safety, it's mentally safety. Are you a trauma-informed person? If you don't know how to work with someone with trauma, then you probably shouldn't work with someone with trauma. My specialty being borderline personality disorder, I have a lot of things to say about that. One being that we shouldn't be ruling this population out of using this substance. Yeah. I keep trying to not say medicine. And also there are safe ways to do it and unsafe ways that this could unfold for these folks. So looking at where your scope of practice is a huge part of safety, and what you're knowledgeable about. I think that I have come across some facilitators who are like, oh, I can just sit with anybody. It's fine. I know what to do. But you don't. And calling into that space, that is one thing that I would love to see happen in Oregon, is get like an ethical board where we can start holding and calling people forward of like, let's talk this through, not to cancel and say you can't ever do this again, but also let's repair and correct and do better. So there's my safety spiel. Ethics.
Great. Thanks, Jenna.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next section. I hope you guys don't mind me just walking through this, but we have psilocybin pharmacology, neuroscience, and clinical research. I think maybe, Darren, we're back to you if you want to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think I've touched on some of it earlier, but yeah, there's several. The knowledge is, because it's a new profession, a new emerging profession, the knowledge is building still. We've got some excellent clinical trials that have shown tremendous promise, but there's still there's still ongoing work to be done. There's other medications that are being researched right now. There's LSD there's a study going on with LSD. There's one going on with 5-MeO, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, there's the reboot with MDMA. And then, of course, there's the psilocybin pill that I think USANA's working on. I also think there's another MindMed. I think MindMed's working on a psilocybin pill, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of different things underway. And that research will continue to inform our practice. And that's what we hope. We want to learn if there's new things or new developments that in these medications we want to know. And I keep saying medications because in my world, that's what they are. That's what I call them. I call them medications in my world. And so I have no problem with that, or plant-based medicines, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so I talk about that. We talk, and I think this kind of bleeds into some of Jenna's work, but talking about the ethics of these medicines, the origins of these medicines and what they do in the brain and how they affect the brain, and how they affect the executive function of the brain, and how they I call them fragmenters, because they really fragment people's experiences in the moment when they're having these amazing experiences. And so the role is to be able to piece those pieces of those broken pieces back together in a way that healing can occur. And so, it's really rare to hear in medicine people say a cure.
Yeah.
Rare to hear that, especially in mental health. But I think this might be something to consider with the curing thing. Even though there's an awful lot, we don't know a lot because clinically these medicines aren't available to the wide variety of people who need them. But we know in the clinical trials, people have done extremely well with them, and even post-treatment, they still seem to be doing well. So, but there's still a lot to know, team, about these medicines and about the long-term effect. We don't know much about how they affect people of color, although we can surmise that they probably do the same thing. And so in the little bitty studies that we've seen on this, the outcomes are just the same. People of color do just as well as on these medicines as anybody else. It's just we don't have enough people of color in the study, so we need to get more in the studies. And I'm working with a couple of groups on that now. So one out of Salt Lake City, and then one of course, with very, very glad to be working with USANA on this, because I know they're making I don't know if you all know this, but the FDA in June required all clinical trials to have a DAP, a diversity action plan. They want them to be able to, now, of course, that may go away because this new administration may come in and say ixnay on that. But the problem is that we don't have good data for large swaths of our citizenry in this country. We don't have good data. And if we don't have large swaths of individuals in this country that we can say took this medicine, we cannot generalize the benefits or efficacy of the medicine as it pertains to other groups and populations. That's why it's important that we really strive to be we are a diverse society. I don't know why people keep ignoring that. We are a diverse society, and we need to act like it. I would say, do good on making sure that we have the right number of people who are represented in a particular study. So that's happening in the field. So I think these states, Oregon and other states, are really leaning into the science. I mean, I know Oregon is y'all are really weird. Oregon's weird. It's weird. And I like weird people. That's the thing I love Oregon so much. I see myself as weird too. And so what I mean by that is, the emphasis on having this be a non-medicalized service for people was a concerted thing that Oregonians did. We don't want this to be a Dr. Rand, blah, 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 Western medicine thing. We want, because that limits people's access. Bravo. Yeah. Bravo. So that's true. Now we have to do better by making sure the price is equitable for people who can afford to do the price. But the things that you all have done to try to offset the diversity key, and it's just really, really commendable, because a lot of places don't give a shit about that. They just don't care. And to have it baked into the curriculum, to have it baked into the rules, the OIT rules, is really commendable. And so, so we'll take what you all have done and continue to improve upon it with the various studies that we're doing. So I'll talk a little bit about the neuroscience of the medicine and so on, the side effects and some of the other troubles that we've seen with the medicines. Although they have been extremely rare, extremely rare.
Yeah. All right. I just feel like we could kind of have this ongoing roundtable discussion about all of these issues that obviously you guys, you're all very knowledgeable, you're all very skilled, you're all very, very much in the field. And it's just fantastic to be able to talk about all these things. But I am looking at the time and thinking I've been keeping you guys for quite a while, and we've still got quite a few bits of the curriculum to go through. So I thought I'd just kind of mention a little bit more of what we've got here. And then maybe we can talk about how people can actually sign up and get involved in these courses if this is an educational program that they want to pursue. So I'm just going to mention a few more things. We've got core facilitation skills, and I really love how all this is spelled out on the website. It's got all these bullet points that really covers all of these different topics and issues. I think it's great for any potential student to be able to see, like, yeah, this is what we're going to be covering. Then we've got preparation and orientation. That's a big part of the program, that you got to prepare people before they have their session, then they have their session, and then, of course, after that, you have the integration. Here, the session itself is the administration, getting into these interesting language issues. Who is the administrator? Then we have integration mastery, again, which is like really a fundamentally like a new topic in the psychedelic world. Really, it's been, I think, mostly within the past 5-6 years that this has really come to the fore, this idea of integration. Then we have group facilitation, and then in-person practicum. So all these different elements to the program. So it really does seem very well-rounded, very comprehensive, and really covers a lot of material. I'm curious, so we've got two of the instructors here. Esteban is not here. Are there also additional instructors in the program, or the three of you guys, do you take care of all of it, or where are we at with the number of instructors?
Yep, we do have additional instructors in the program. For January, though, the main instructors are Jenna, Darren, and Esteban. And then we have Sheila Winsmith. She's a licensed facilitator in Oregon. We have Michael Ritter. He's a nationally registered EMT in Oregon. We have one of our licensed instructors is also Mary Jane Wilt. She owns a service center in Portland. And we're hiring more as we're scaling. We're also going to be opening up a program in Colorado probably by this summer. And then when Washington comes on board, opening one there as well is the plan. So we're going to keep opening programs in legal states so that we can really move forward with the mission of making these services safe and affordable for people, and doing what we can to play our role to really make this a real reality for the everyday person. So
awesome, Laurel. So if somebody wants to learn more, if they're curious, they want to join the program, just looking at the website, I see that there are like different dates when programs start. So what is coming up? And just this interview, most likely I'm going to be releasing this in the beginning of January. So just to give us so like in a few weeks from now, this will be coming out. But it might be after your initial January date that you have. But tell us, like, when can people enroll? And then exactly how long are the programs? Like, if you're committing to this, how much schooling are you going to be attending?
Yeah, so the next coming training session starts January 6th. And then that one, each session is 10 weeks long. So essentially how it works is that you will apply to be into the program, which is the Enroll Now button on the website. It'll lead you to the formal application for enrollment. You'll fill that out. And there's also a discovery call button there as well. So if you have questions that you'd like to know about the program, you can schedule a call with one of our admissions advisors. And once the application is evaluated, then you'll be contacted and be given admissions interview where you're asked some further questions, and then it's determined whether or not you're admitted into the program. And then once you go from there, you decide which cohort you're going to go ahead and sign up for. So we run training programs every approximately 10 to 11 weeks. And also it's kind of a misnomer that they're 10-week programs because you don't have to take it at that 10-week pace. So there's a few different components to the program. One is that you have online modular work that you work through that's self-directed weeks 1 through 10. So you'll log into the classroom. There are assigned readings, there's essay assignments, there's quizzes that you have to do. And then you also have lectures, live lectures that you come through. come to for weeks 1 through 10. So you log into class again. There's a Zoom link in your student portal in your classroom, and you'll go to class Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And depending upon which module you're in that week, it'll determine who your instructor is. Like you'll have Jenna as one of your instructors for some of the content. For some of it, you'll have Darren. For some, you'll have Esteban. So it switches up. And then also there's the in-person component, which is 40 hours in person. So that occurs the last 3 weekends of the program, which it's weekend 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Weekend 9, same thing, Saturday, Sunday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Weekend 10 is just Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we also do like a little graduation ceremony for the students. But if people don't want to take it at such a break fast pace, they have up to 6 months to complete the online self-directed work. So as long as they come to the live lectures, they can take their time to kind of process through the content, take it at a slower pace, and not have to do it in that 10-week session. So that's kind of how everything works.
All right, great. Well, I think I'm going to let you guys go now. We've been going for about an hour and a half, and I do got to take my son out fishing, but I really appreciate having this conversation. And Darren had to jump off because he had another call, but really appreciated all of his input. And Jenna, thanks so much for everything that you've shared within the conversation. And Laurel, thank you for making all of this possible for us to even have this conversation on this topic. And it's really been a pleasure. And yeah, I feel like we could just kind of keep talking because there's so much to talk about here, but I really appreciate everything that you guys have shared. And just congratulations on being at the vanguard of this very new area of, I can't call it healthcare, but we'll just call it psychedelic access. And this very new area of psychedelic access in the United States being pioneered here in the state of Oregon. And I'm just thrilled with the work that you are doing and the level of care and attention and everything else that you guys are bringing to it. I think you've established a fantastic team, Laurel. So just thanks so much for everything that you've shared here today on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure getting to know all of you guys and hear everything that you have to share.
Well, thank you for having us on. And I am just incredibly thankful for the instructors that have come and are part of our institute, because I couldn't ask for better, more educated, more well-rounded, phenomenal people that really care about this industry and are dedicated to building it out, So, yeah.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm super excited to be a part of all of it. So, yeah, thanks for platforming the Emerald Valley Institute, Martin. I'm super excited to be on Laurel's team, again, with the shared values of making this for the everyday person, not just for people with thousands of dollars. It starts with the facilitator being able to afford to facilitate. So, yeah, thank you for starting it at the ground floor, Laurel, and yeah. Thanks for having us on, Martin.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for your time, and happy holidays to you. Enjoy the time with your kids and your families, and love to just stay in touch, and we'll see how things continue to grow and develop here in the beautiful state of Oregon.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, guys.